In this section, I want to talk about ancestry and identity and how we can use DNA to look at the origin of us as a species. When we talk about analyzing DNA of humans, right, Homo sapiens, we are the only living species of human, but we are not the only species of human that ever existed. So within our genus is called Homo, there have been numerous other species. And what's really interesting is how we can look at the DNA of those other human species, look at our DNA, and start to think about, how did we come to be? I think it's a really interesting question to think about. So this map here, it groups, it calls them Homo heidelbergensis and then Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens are shown here in green, and the other species, which my German is terrible, so I'm not going to try it, are shown with these yellow triangles. And what's really cool, you might have heard of the things like Neanderthals. That's shown here in yellow. So you can see that there are sites where modern human fossils, Homo sapiens, have been found with things like Neanderthals and other humans. And what this is showing is, again, this idea that we had Homo sapiens, and then we had this kind of common ancestor here, this heidelbergensis. And from that, we had the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. And the Denisovans and the Neanderthals are not Homo sapiens, they're not the same as us. But what they're trying to show here is that there was some interbreeding. So how do we know that? Well, we know that by looking at the DNA, what this whole class is about. So where did these ancient humans live? Neanderthals were thought to evolve about 400,000 years ago and went extinct approximately 40,000 years ago. Now, when we think about that timeline, I want you to really understand that Homo sapiens lived at the same time. So there were different species of humans that lived together at the same time. So Neanderthals, those are almost what we think of as like cavemen. They had really large brow ridges. So any sort of like portrayal of a caveman where you've seen they have these kind of thick foreheads, that's what we mean by a large brow ridge. They also had a large brain volume similar to us. So even though they are cavemen, it's not like they were stupid. That's kind of the stereotype, I guess, of Neanderthals, or you'll talk about, oh, well, what a Neanderthal. Like they're, stupid and uncivilized, but their brain was the size or similar size to modern humans. So they weren't any less smart than us. We know that they used tools. It is very likely that they had language, that they spoke and communicated, and they engaged in what we call symbolic behavior. For example, art. They buried their dead. Right? They had these behaviors that we typically think of as human. The other group of humans that lived at the same time as Homo sapiens are the Denisovans. And these we know less about. They were discovered more recently, but estimates are that they lived between 200,000 and 50,000 years ago. And their remains have been found in places like East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Oceania, which is going to be places like Australia. Now, we separate these because they are actually different genetically. So the Denisovans, the Neanderthals, and Homo sapiens are all genetically distinct. And what we can see here is where we have found more of these fossils of the Neanderthals are mostly in kind of the Middle East, up through Europe. And the Denisovans are, again, more over here towards Asia. Now, modern humans were, for the most part, living in Africa. And all of these humans evolved in Africa. But the Neanderthals and the Denisovans most likely migrated out first. They left first. Then, about 60,000 years ago, there was this big migration of modern humans, Homo sapiens. And what we know, based on our analysis of Neanderthal and Denisovan remains, is that even though we were technically different species, there was a significant amount of interbreeding. What we tend to see is that individuals of Western and Northern European descent and even parts of Western Asia have anywhere between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA. When we sequence, Homo sapien genomes versus Neanderthal genomes, we can identify genes that are Neanderthal, distinctly Neanderthal, that are found in the genomes, or alleles, mutations that are found in the genome of Homo sapiens of European and Western Asian descent. In East Asia, we see a similar, maybe even a little bit higher percentage of Neanderthal DNA. And we start to see this Denisovan DNA appear in the genome, but not a ton. As we get farther away from this kind of hybrid zone where you have Neanderthal and Denisovan and Homo sapiens, like right in here, as you start to get farther away, we actually start to see higher percentages of Denisovan DNA. So the Aboriginal populations that lived in Oceania, so like Australia, have upwards of 6% Denisovan DNA. And they have less Neanderthal DNA. And then when we really think about, okay, all of this interbreeding that was going on, when you look at individuals of sub-Saharan African descent, they have little to no Neanderthal DNA. And to me, that's a really, I don't know, I was thinking about this as I was, thinking about how am I going to record this lecture and what are the things that I want to say. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is that, who is most human? Well, technically, individuals of sub-Saharan African descent. They are most human. They are most pure Homo sapiens. Individuals that resulted from these interbreedings, a little more Neanderthal or a little bit more Denisovan, a little less Homo sapien. And I thought that was just a really cool thing to think about, that there was this hybridization of species going on. So, we can look at this through the DNA. This is how we get this information. It's also kind of interesting to think about, well, what did we pick up from the Neanderthals or the Denisovans? What do we see? And what we see is that there are traits influenced by Neanderthal DNA. Things like our immune system genes that help us have more resistance to pathogens. That can allow for exploration in new areas, because if there are new pathogens, having a more robust immune system can help us fight those new pathogens. We see changes to the genes for skin and hair, like keratin-related genes. There are more adaptations to colder, drier climates. We see pain perception. People with one of the Neanderthal variants are more sensitive to pain. And we see genes linked to things like depression, addiction, and circadian rhythm regulation. So that's your day-night cycle. So that's what we see on the Neanderthal side. What do we see? What traits seem to be influenced by having the Denisovan DNA in the background? Well, we see one specific gene that provides high altitude adaptation, so better processing in that thin atmosphere, so more hemoglobin to help transfer oxygen better. We see also changes in immune system genes that allow differential pathogen recognition. And there seem to be some genes involved in the skin barrier function and fat metabolism. How those are working in terms of like how is the Denisovan DNA influencing the modern human, that's still up in the air. But, having this genetic material and having this ability to study has really been what allows us to start to tease apart our origins even more carefully. And so if you've ever done 23andMe, and I know I've shown you 23andMe results from myself before, I was like a little bit offended here. I have more Neanderthal DNA than like 1/3 of the other customers. That's fine. This is fine. And I super offended, 2 variants associated with having a worse sense of direction. That is actually untrue. Either that or, because I told you before in another lecture that I'm adopted. So either I, think that's wrong, that I have a worse sense of direction, or the family that adopted me has even worse variants for that, because my family does not have the best sense of direction. We've been on a number of different trips where I've said, well, you can follow me or you can not. That's your choice. And, it's the middle of summer in Washington, D.C., and I'm sitting in the hotel lobby with my one aunt who decided, well, I'll trust this one. And we're sipping sodas. Everybody rolls up an hour later, sweating bullets. I'm like, I told you I knew how to get where I was going. So again, having a variant doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to experience that phenotype, but that is what's there in the DNA. And then what I'm showing you here, this is a picture of all of my autosomes. And for each of my autosomes, remember we have 2 copies. So I have chromosome 1, 2, 3, all the way through 22. And on each of them, right, all these little blue markers indicate the position of a variant associated with Neanderthal DNA rather than Homo sapien DNA. So in some places you can see that I have it only on 1 copy of my chromosome. In other places, like right here on chromosome 19, it looks like I have both variants, chromosome 8, chromosome 6, chromosome 3. So again, at the end of the day, does this change my daily life? No, but is it an interesting piece of information that we can, find out more about, who we are in terms of our genetics and in terms of our history? Yeah, and sometimes that's the fun part of it all.